3:47 p.m. The explosion ripped through Cedar Falls like thunder from an angry god. The 10-story Kensington Industries building shuddered violently. Glass exploded outward in a deadly shower, catching the afternoon sunlight like 1,000 falling diamonds, before crashing to the pavement below. Steel screamed, concrete crumbled, smoke poured from shattered windows, black and thick, clawing toward a sky that had been perfectly blue just moments before. People ran, screaming, stumbling. Mothers grabbed children. Businessmen in expensive suits sprinted alongside janitors in worn uniforms. Everyone fled the same direction, away from the chaos, away from the fire, away from death. Everyone except one man. Garrett Holden ran toward the collapsing tower, his work boots hammered against the asphalt, his worn electrician's uniform, still stained with grease from the morning's job, flapped against his chest. Burning debris rained down around him like hellfire, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. Someone grabbed his arm. "Are you insane? Get back!" He shook them off and kept running. Inside that building, now shaking from explosions that a desperate man had triggered, were the two people who mattered most: his 7-year-old daughter Rosalie, and the woman who, just 8 hours earlier, had looked at him with cold blue eyes and told him his dead wife's watch belonged in a garage sale. The woman who had changed completely since that morning. The woman who had risked everything to do what was right. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, but not close enough, not fast enough. What could possibly drive a single father, a man with everything to lose and nothing to gain, to risk his life for someone who had humiliated him just hours before? The answer lay in what happened during those 8 hours, in secrets uncovered, in connections discovered, in the transformation of bitter enemies into something neither of them ever expected. 8 hours earlier, 6:30 a.m., the Holden apartment, 2nd floor, Lincoln Heights neighborhood. Morning light crept through the single window, casting pale stripes across a kitchen table covered in bills. Red letters screamed from every envelope. Overdue, final notice, payment required immediately. Rosalie Holden sat at that table, carefully spreading peanut butter on a slice of bread that had gone slightly stale overnight. She was 7 years old, with hair the color of summer wheat and eyes so blue they could break your heart. Her mother's eyes, everyone always said. The same eyes Garrett saw every single morning and every single night, constantly reminding him of everything he had lost. No jelly today. They'd run out 3 days ago. Grocery money wouldn't come until Friday, and Friday felt like a lifetime away. Garrett watched his daughter from across the small kitchen, pretending to organize his toolbox while actually checking his wallet for what felt like the 100th time that week. $18.37. Not enough for the overdue water bill. Not enough for Rosalie's school supplies. Certainly not enough for both. On his wrist, an old watch ticked steadily. The leather band was cracked and worn from years of use. The crystal face bore a small scratch from when Alara had accidentally knocked it against a doorframe while laughing at her own clumsiness. The second hand ran 3 minutes slow every single day without fail. Garrett never fixed it, never replaced it, never even considered it. Some things that are broken should stay broken, like monuments to what once was, like proof that love existed even after it was gone. "Daddy?" Rosalie's small voice pulled him back to the present moment. "Mrs. Henderson said our school might get torn down to build something really big. Is that true?"
"I need the system back up and running before 11 o'clock. Can you do it quickly?"
"I'm doing it right so no one has to pay the price later."
The question hit him like a physical punch to the chest. Lincoln Elementary, the school that had saved his daughter during the darkest months after Alara died. The teachers who stayed late every afternoon to work with Rosalie when she refused to speak for months on end. The counselor who patiently helped her learn to say, "I miss mommy," without completely falling apart. Probably just a silly rumor, sweetheart. Grown-ups say things they don't really mean sometimes. Rosalie looked at him with those blue eyes, Ilara's eyes, and he knew immediately that she saw right through his desperate lie. She'd always been too perceptive for her young age, too wise, too painfully aware of the hard edges of the world that most 7-year-olds never had to see. She took a small bite of her peanut butter bread. No complaint, no whining about missing jelly, no tears. "I know, Daddy," she said softly, her voice steady and calm. "It's okay. No jelly doesn't matter at all. Bread is still bread. It still fills your tummy just the same." Garrett turned away quickly before she could see his eyes filling with tears. 7 years old, and already his daughter had learned to accept less without ever asking for more. Already she had learned to make peace with missing things, with empty spaces, with holes that could never quite be filled. Just like her father. The Kensington Industries building rose against the morning sky like a fortress of glass and steel. 10 stories of pure corporate power, gleaming brilliantly in the early sunlight, surrounded by a parking lot absolutely filled with Mercedes, BMWs, and at least 2 sleek Maseratis. Garrett's pickup truck, faded paint, badly dented bumper, engine that coughed and sputtered on cold mornings, looked completely out of place among all that accumulated wealth. Like a mistake someone had made and forgotten to correct. He'd been called in for an emergency electrical repair. Something about a power surge that had knocked out half the building's critical systems overnight. Good money if he did the job right. Enough to maybe pay down one of those screaming red overdue bills waiting on his kitchen table. Donovan, the security guard working the morning shift, waved him through the entrance checkpoint with a warm, sympathetic smile. Big man with kind eyes, the sort of genuinely decent person who actually remembered your name and sincerely asked about your family. "Careful in there today, Garrett. The boss lady's been absolutely tearing through people all morning like a tornado through a trailer park. Nobody's safe. Thanks for the warning. I appreciate it. Hey, one more thing." Donovan lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Heard your kid goes to Lincoln Elementary over in your neighborhood. There's been some serious talk about that whole area lately. Keep your ears open while you're up there working." Before Garrett could ask what exactly he meant, the elevator doors opened directly behind him with a soft chime. A man stepped out into the lobby. Silver hair swept back from an aristocratic, angular face. 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Garrett earned in an entire year. Shoes polished to an absolutely perfect mirror shine. Malcolm Prescott. The name was etched prominently on a brass plate beside the elevator. Vice President, Kensington Industries. Prescott's cold gaze swept over Garrett like he was nothing more than furniture. Not worth noticing. Not worth acknowledging. Barely worth the effort of looking at. Then his pale eyes stopped moving. On Garrett's wrist, on the old watch with its cracked leather band and scratched crystal face. Just for a single second. Then Prescott looked away dismissively and strode toward the building's main exit, his expensive Italian shoes clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. But that single second was more than enough to send an unexplained chill racing down Garrett's spine. Something deeply unsettling lurked in that brief look. Something cold and calculating. Something that felt profoundly wrong. The basement of Kensington Industries was cold, dim, and almost unnaturally quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead like sleeping insects. Massive generators rumbled steadily behind thick concrete walls. The recycled air smelled of ozone.
Did you come here to win a negotiation, or because you're genuinely not okay?
I'm not okay. And I said unforgivable things.
And old accumulated dust. Garrett had been working methodically for nearly 2 full hours, carefully tracing the mysterious power surge through a complex maze of circuits and tangled cables. It was logical, systematic work, the kind of satisfying puzzle his analytical brain genuinely enjoyed solving. The sharp click of high heels on bare concrete shattered his deep concentration completely. Each deliberate step echoed through the basement like a countdown to something terrible. Closer, closer, closer still. Serafina Kensington appeared at the bottom of the concrete stairs. Platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe, unforgiving bun. Not a single strand dared to be out of place. Charcoal gray suit tailored to absolute perfection. Probably worth more than 3 full months of Garrett's modest income. Diamond studs in her ears caught the harsh, fluorescent light and scattered tiny rainbow fragments against the drab concrete walls like expensive confetti. She surveyed the entire basement like an imperious queen inspecting a particularly filthy dungeon. with obvious, undisguised distaste, as if the very air down here might somehow contaminate her expensive designer clothing. "You're the electrician." Not a question, a flat statement of fact, delivered with surgical precision and zero warmth. "How long will this repair take?" "About 3 more hours, ma'am." Garrett deliberately didn't turn around from his work. "I need to trace the problem carefully through multiple circuits to make absolutely sure it doesn't happen again unexpectedly." 3 hours. The 2 words dripped with icy contempt. "I have an extremely important conference call with Goldman Sachs at exactly 11 o'clock. This entire building needs to be fully operational well before then, or there will be serious consequences for everyone involved. I completely understand the urgency, ma'am, but if I don't do this repair job correctly the first time, you could potentially face a much bigger and more dangerous problem down the line. Electrical fires don't particularly care about anyone's conference call schedule." Heavy silence filled the basement. Garrett could physically feel her intense gaze boring into his back like a focused laser beam. "How long have you been doing this particular kind of work, Mr. Holden?" "Garrett Holden, 8 years total now. I started as an apprentice right out of high school and worked my way up from there." 8 years? She repeated the number slowly, as if it was somehow an insult all by itself. "And this is as far as you've managed to get in all that time? Crawling around in dirty basements, fixing other people's problems? No real ambitions beyond that? No bigger dreams or goals?" Now Garrett did turn around to face her directly. He looked straight into her cold blue eyes, at the perfect flawless makeup, at the invisible armor of wealth and power she wore so naturally, like a second skin. "I have a young daughter to support completely on my own. This honest work puts food on our table and keeps a solid roof over her head. That's more than enough ambition for someone like me." Serafina stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell her expensive perfume. Something floral and sophisticated, with an undertone he couldn't quite identify. Maybe money itself actually had a distinctive smell. Her sharp eyes dropped deliberately to his wrist, to the old watch with its worn band and scratched face. "Is that pathetic thing supposed to be a timepiece?" She laughed, a sound exactly like breaking glass in a completely empty room. "It looks like something you'd find thrown away at a garage sale." "No. Actually, even a garage sale would probably reject something that's sad and worn out." Garrett felt his jaw tighten involuntarily. "It belonged to my wife." "Your wife clearly has terrible taste in jewelry. She passed away 2 years ago now." A normal, decent person would have stopped right there, would have immediately apologized for the insensitive comment, would have at least shown the basic grace to look genuinely embarrassed by their cruel words. Serafina Kensington was clearly not a normal, decent person. "Cancer, I assume?" She tilted her perfectly groomed head, studying him with detached curiosity, like a scientist examining an interesting specimen under a microscope. Garrett nodded stiffly, not trusting his voice. "That must have been terribly expensive. All that treatment, the final expenses, everything piling up. Let me guess. That's exactly why you're still doing this kind of menial work after all these years? Because you're completely drowning in crushing medical debt? That's really not any of your concern." "Oh, but it..."
My father was cared for by your wife in the hospital. He wrote about her a lot, so...
You didn't just come to apologize. You came for the truth.
Absolutely is my concern." She pulled out her phone and swiped through several screens with practiced ease. "Garrett Holden, 34 years old, currently residing at apartment 2B, Morrison Building, Lincoln Heights neighborhood. Widower with 1 daughter. Rosalie, 7 years old, currently enrolled in 2nd grade at Lincoln Elementary School. Outstanding medical debt, $31,847. Electric bill, 2 months overdue. Water bill, 1 month overdue." All the blood drained from Garrett's face. "You actually had me investigated? I always make it my business to know exactly who's working inside my building." She put the phone away casually, her eyes as sharp and cold as surgical knives. "Especially people who seem dangerously financially unstable. Desperate people tend to do desperate, unpredictable things. I came here today to work honestly, not to be insulted and degraded." Serafina stepped even closer to him, close enough that he could see the tiny stress lines at the corners of her eyes. Subtle signs of pressure that her expensive professional skincare routine couldn't quite manage to hide completely. Do you know anything about Lincoln Elementary, Mr. Holden? The school where your precious daughter goes every day? She paused deliberately, letting the words sink in slowly. It's scheduled for complete demolition in exactly 6 weeks, along with the entire rest of the Lincoln Heights neighborhood, to make way for Lincoln Heights Galleria, my company's $500 million development project. The basement seemed to physically shrink around him. The air grew thick and heavy, hard to breathe properly. 300 children attend that school every day. They'll all be transferred eventually to Harrison Elementary, 20 miles west of here. She shrugged casually, a dismissive gesture that swept away the lives of 300 innocent families like insignificant crumbs brushed carelessly from an expensive tablecloth. Progress always requires sacrifice, Mr. Holden. Some people understand that basic reality. Others, she looked him up and down with obvious, undisguised contempt, spend their entire lives pathetically clinging to dead wives and broken dreams that can never be fixed. Don't. His voice dropped low and dangerous. Don't you dare talk about my wife. But Serafina had clearly found his deepest weakness, and she pressed even harder without mercy. That pathetic watch. Does it even work properly anymore? She pointed at Alara's watch with one perfectly manicured finger. Your daughter deserves so much better than a father who desperately clings to ghosts instead of building her an actual future. When Rosalie eventually grows up and truly understands what kind of man her father really is, someone perpetually drowning in debt, drowning in pathetic self-pity, choosing worthless sentiment over her actual well-being. She leaned in close, her whisper somehow more venomous and cutting than any shout could ever be. She's going to be deeply, profoundly ashamed of you. The words landed like physical blows, each one precisely aimed at his most vulnerable spots, each one drawing real blood. Garrett stood completely frozen, his face pale as paper, his breathing shallow and ragged. He had somehow weathered poverty, crushing grief, terrible loneliness, and deep despair over the past 2 years. But this deliberate cruelty, this surgical destruction of everything he held most dear, this was something entirely different. Get out! His voice was barely audible. Serafina smiled coldly, clearly satisfied with the extensive damage she had inflicted. Finish the repair work properly, Mr. Holden, and try not to let your pathetic personal problems affect the quality of your work. I'd really hate to have to find someone more competent. Her heels clicked sharply against the concrete as she walked away. Each step echoed like a funeral march in the confined space. Garrett stood alone in that cold, dim basement for a very long time afterward, simply staring at Alara's watch on his wrist. The second hand kept moving steadily, 3 minutes slow, but still faithful.
I don't believe you're so fickle. Give me a reason to believe.
Because this time I choose children and the truth, even if I have to lose everything.
Moving, still marking time, still there, still with him. But even as justified anger coursed through his veins, something else flickered at the very edge of his consciousness. A nagging question he couldn't quite dismiss. In that brief moment when Serafina first noticed the watch, just before all the calculated cruelty began, he had seen something unexpected flash across her carefully composed face. Not contempt, not disgust, pain, as if the old watch reminded her of something deeply buried, something she was desperately trying to forget. What exactly was Serafina Kensington hiding behind that icy facade? 7 p.m., Cedar Falls Community Center. The auditorium was packed far beyond its official capacity. Over 200 concerned people crammed into uncomfortable folding chairs, lined every available wall space, and spilled out into the narrow hallway. Parents, teachers, small business owners, elderly residents who had lived in Lincoln Heights for 50 years or more. All of them angry, all of them deeply afraid. A city official stood at the podium, reading from prepared remarks about unavoidable progress and generous relocation assistance packages with the enthusiasm of someone reading a boring grocery list aloud. Margot Sullivan rose abruptly from her seat in the third row. Single mother of two, worked two exhausting jobs just to make ends meet. Her daughter Savannah was Rosalie's very best friend in the whole world. Relocation assistance, her voice shook with barely contained fury. Your so-called assistance package wouldn't even cover first month's rent anywhere decent in this market. My daughter just finally started feeling safe again after her father walked out on us. You want me to rip her away from the only school she's ever known? Murmurs of strong agreement rippled through the packed crowd. Someone near the back shouted angrily, "They sold us out to a giant corporation." Garrett sat quietly in the very back row, watching and listening intently, feeling the combined weight of 200 breaking hearts pressing heavily against his own chest. When his turn finally came to speak, he walked to the podium on legs that felt like lead. "I'm not a lawyer," he began, his voice surprisingly steady. "Not a politician or anyone important. I'm just a regular electrician, single father. My daughter Rosalie is in second grade at Lincoln Elementary." He paused, looking down at the worn watch on his wrist. 2 years ago, my wife died of cancer. The months immediately after that, Rosalie barely spoke at all, barely ate anything, barely seemed truly alive anymore. I didn't know how to reach her, didn't know how to help her keep going when I could barely keep going myself. The entire auditorium fell completely silent. Lincoln Elementary saved my daughter's life. Mrs. Carter stayed after school every single day for weeks on end, drawing pictures with Rosalie when that was the only time she would actually smile. Mrs. Bennett, the school counselor, met with her during every lunch period, helping her slowly learn to say, "I miss Mommy," without completely falling apart. His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed through. Lincoln isn't just a building you can tear down and replace with something shinier. It's a real community, a genuine family. It's where 300 kids learn to trust other people, to love each other, to survive when everything falls apart. No relocation package in the world can ever compensate for losing that. Sincere applause broke out across the room. Not thunderous, but deeply heartfelt. Hands clasped together, tearful eyes met across the crowded space. For one brief moment, they were all connected, all fighting the same impossible battle together. 10:47 p.m., the Holden apartment. Rosalie was finally asleep after their usual lengthy bedtime routine. 3 complete stories, 2 glasses of water, 1 extended negotiation about whether monsters actually lived in the closet. A knock at the door. No one ever visited at this late hour. Neighbors always texted first. Bill collectors didn't work at night. Garrett looked through the small peephole and felt the entire world tilt crazily beneath his feet. Serafina Kensington stood alone in his dingy hallway, but this wasn't the Serafina from the basement that morning. Gone was the severe, expensive suit, the tightly pulled back hair, the impenetrable armor of corporate perfection. She wore simple jeans and a plain sweater. Her blonde hair fell loose and natural around her shoulders. Without professional makeup, the dark circles under her eyes were clearly visible. Signs of deep exhaustion that powder and foundation usually manage to hide. She looked human, vulnerable, and that was perhaps the strangest thing of all. Garrett opened the door slowly, said nothing, just waited. "I need to speak with you," she said, her voice lacking all of its earlier cutting sharpness. "About what I said this morning, and about something else, something important." "How do you know where I live?" He already knew the answer. "Right, you had me investigated." "Yes, no denial, no apology. May I please come in?" Everything in him screamed to slam the door directly in her face, but something in her eyes, something he recognized from his own reflection in the mirror, stopped him cold. Loneliness. Bone-deep, soul-crushing loneliness. He stepped aside silently. The apartment must have looked absolutely pathetic to her refined eyes. Worn second-hand furniture, peeling wallpaper, overdue bills stacked on every available surface. A far cry from the glass towers and polished marble lobbies of her privileged world. But Serafina wasn't looking at any of that. She was staring intently at the photograph on the dusty shelf. Ilara, in her nurse's scrubs, holding newborn Rosalie in her arms. That radiant smile, the one that could light up any room instantly. Those eyes, the same brilliant blue eyes that now looked at Garrett every morning from his daughter's beloved face. She was beautiful, Serafina whispered, her voice barely audible. She looks kind, like someone who would never deliberately hurt anyone. Garrett studied her carefully. The woman who had viciously destroyed him that morning was now standing in his shabby apartment, staring at his dead wife's photograph with something that looked almost like longing, as if she'd never in her entire life been looked at with love the way Alara looked at that camera. "Are you okay?" The question clearly surprised them both. Serafina turned, her blue eyes wide, confused, as if he'd spoken in some foreign language she didn't understand. "Why would you ask me that?" "Because you obviously don't seem okay. This morning you attacked me like you genuinely wanted blood. Now you're standing here at 11 at night, looking at my wife's picture like," he searched for exactly the right words, "like you're desperately searching for something you've never had." Silence stretched between them. Then, without any warning, her eyes glistened with unexpected tears. "No one asked me that," she said, her voice cracking. "No one has asked me that in a very, very long time. People ask me about quarterly revenue and profit margins and expansion plans. Nobody ever asks if I'm okay." For the first time, Garrett actually saw her. Not the CEO, not the Ice Queen, just a lonely woman who had everything money could possibly buy and absolutely nothing that actually mattered. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. Garrett with his cold coffee, Serafina with a simple glass of water. Between them lay a leather-bound journal she had pulled from her bag. 8 years ago, she began slowly. "My father had a serious heart attack, a very bad one. He spent 2 full weeks at Cedar Falls Memorial Hospital recovering." Garrett sat up straight. Cedar Falls Memorial, where Alara had worked. "The nurse who personally cared for him during those 2 weeks," Serafina looked at the photograph of Alara on the shelf, "was your wife, Alara Holden." The room seemed to spin. Garrett could only stare at her in disbelief. "How do you know that?" She opened the old journal carefully. "My father's personal diary. I found it just last week while cleaning out his old office." She turned to a marked page. "He wrote about Alara for 15 complete pages. Read it to me." His voice was hoarse. "Please." Serafina nodded and began. "March 15th. Nurse Alara came to my room again today. She doesn't look at me like everyone else does. Not with fear, not with false flattery, not with cold indifference. She looks at me like a patient who needs care. Nothing more or less than that. And strangely, that's exactly what I need most." She carefully turned another page. "March 18th. Alara told me about her husband today, an electrician named Garrett. She spoke about him with such light in her eyes, like he was the most wonderful man in the entire world. I asked her, 'But he's not rich.' She laughed and said, 'What does rich matter if every morning when I wake up, he's the first person I want to see?'" Garrett had to turn away. He didn't want Serafina to see him crying. "March 25th, my last day here. Alara said to me, 'Mr. Kensington, you have everything money can buy. But what do you have that money can't buy? That's what really matters in the end.' I couldn't answer her honestly, because the honest answer was, nothing. I have nothing at all." Serafina closed the journal gently. "My father changed after he left the hospital," she continued. "He started asking questions about ethics, about responsibility, about what kind of legacy he wanted to leave behind. I thought he was just going soft in his old age. Now I finally understand. It was because of Alara." She pulled out an old envelope from inside the journal. "Your wife wrote to my father after he was discharged. They exchanged letters for 3 years, until she was diagnosed with cancer." Garrett took the envelope with trembling hands. Alara's handwriting. He recognized it instantly. Those round, careful letters, the little flourish on her capital letters. "She never told me," he whispered, "about your father, about any of this. Patient confidentiality, probably. And perhaps," Serafina's voice softened, "perhaps she wanted to keep something just for herself, a little corner of the world only she knew about." But there was more. "Do you know who originally owned the land where Lincoln Elementary stands?" Serafina asked. Garrett shook his head. Prescott Chemical. Malcolm Prescott's family company. And that land is contaminated, Garrett. Badly contaminated. Industrial chemicals from 20 years of operations seeped deep into the soil, spread into the groundwater. She looked him directly in the eyes. My father bought that land from Prescott back in 2003, then sold it to the school district at a significant loss. Do you know why? The pieces clicked into place. Because schools require strict environmental testing before construction. He forced them to properly clean up the contamination. Exactly right. My father did that after meeting Alara. She told him that doing the right thing mattered more than profit. And he actually tried to change. So Malcolm Prescott wants to buy that land back now, to build the shopping center and permanently bury all evidence of the contamination his family caused. Serafina's grip on the journal tightened, and I, until just last week, thought it was simply a normal business project. Malcolm hid everything from me. 2 days later, everything was falling into place. Serafina had secretly retrieved environmental files from her father's safe deposit box. Garrett had contacted an independent environmental engineer to collect new soil samples. They had solid evidence, or would very soon. Then everything fell apart. 3:15 p.m. Garrett was working at a job site when his phone rang. Margot, panic in her voice. Garrett, someone came to pick up Rosalie. His heart stopped. What? Who? A woman. She said she was Rosalie's aunt. She had photos of Alara, documentation. Oh God, Garrett. She looked so legitimate. Rosalie seemed to recognize her from the photo. Alara didn't have any sisters. Terrifying silence. Oh God, Garrett, I'm so sorry. He was already running to his truck. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Mr. Holden, your daughter is very well behaved. If you want to see her again, come to Kensington Industries, executive floor, 9 p.m. tonight, alone. If I see police, you will never see Rosalie again. When he reached his apartment, he found a note on the table. Serafina's handwriting. Garrett, Malcolm contacted me. He has Rosalie and wants to meet me at Kensington. I know you'll want to come, but please don't. Let me handle this. I caused this by investigating. I'll end it. S. Garrett crumpled the paper in his fist. Like hell, I'm staying here. 8:47 p.m. Kensington Industries. The building loomed against the night sky, most windows completely dark. Only the top floor, the executive level, glowed with light. Garrett parked 2 blocks away, approached on foot. He knew this building intimately, had repaired its electrical systems many times, knew every back entrance and service corridor. 3 minutes later, he was inside. Service elevator, up to the 10th floor. Voices reached him from the VIP lounge. You really thought you could betray me, Serafina, after everything I've done for your family? The only thing you've done is use my father's company to cover up your family's crimes. Garrett peered through the crack in the door. Malcolm stood in the center of the room, expensive suit impeccable, whiskey glass in hand. Serafina faced him, pale but steady, and in the corner, on a leather sofa, Rosalie was sleeping. The girl is fine, Malcolm said dismissively. Just a mild sedative to keep her quiet. I'm not a monster. You kidnapped a 7-year-old child. How is that not monstrous? Malcolm shrugged. I'm protecting my family's legacy. 3 generations of work. Your father nearly destroyed it all with his ridiculous scheme. Garrett couldn't wait any longer. He pushed through the door. That scheme saved children from being poisoned, and the child on that sofa is my daughter. You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't break your face right now. Malcolm didn't flinch. Ah, Mr. Holden, I expected you wouldn't listen. He pressed a button. Doors locked with a heavy click. Now we have a proper gathering. The confrontation escalated quickly. Malcolm admitted everything. The contamination, the cover-up, his willingness to let children suffer to protect his profits. The contamination at Lincoln Heights has been making children sick for 20 years, he said casually. Cancer, developmental problems, all traceable to Prescott Chemical. You're admitting it. It's business. Contamination is a cost of operation. Cleaning it up costs hundreds of millions. Covering it up costs a few million plus profits from the new development. Simple mathematics. Then Serafina smiled. You know, Malcolm, I learned something from my father, and something from Alara Holden. She pulled out her phone. 45 minutes ago, I sent emails to the board of directors, the EPA, the Cedar Falls Gazette, and the FBI. All of my father's environmental files, new soil test results, your internal emails, and a recording of everything you've said tonight. Malcolm's face went gray. Sirens wailed outside. I also called 911, reported a kidnapping. Malcolm's face twisted with sudden rage. He lunged toward a hidden panel on the wall. If I'm going down, I'm taking everything with me. His hand slammed down on a button. The building shuddered violently. Deep in the basement, something exploded. The floor trembled. Lights flickered. Smoke began seeping through the ventilation system. Thermite charges in the basement server room, Malcolm snarled. Every digital file about Lincoln Heights, gone. And this building, rubble in 15 minutes. Alarms screamed. Red emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. Garrett grabbed Rosalie. We need to get out, now. But the ceiling groaned. A crack spider-webbed across the plaster above Serafina. Sarah, move! Garrett lunged toward her as concrete crashed down. He shoved her aside, shielding Rosalie with his body. The fire escape! Serafina pointed to the emergency exit, blocked by debris. Garrett spotted the electrical panel. His hands moved with 8 years of muscle memory, ripping off the cover, rerouting power. Emergency sprinklers activated. Magnetic locks clicked open. Go! Get her out! Serafina ran with Rosalie toward the fire escape. Garrett turned back and found Malcolm blocking his path, metal pipe in hand. You ruined everything. He swung. The pipe caught Garrett's shoulder, sending him sprawling. Malcolm raised the pipe again. The door burst open. Police flooded in. Drop the weapon. Get on the ground. Malcolm hesitated, then dropped the pipe. It was over. Malcolm Prescott was handcuffed, surrounded by rubble and smoke. Camera flashes exploded. His face would be on every front page by morning. Garrett found Rosalie in Serafina's arms, both safe outside. Daddy? Rosalie's sleepy voice reached him. I dreamed about Mommy. She said someone would protect us. Her eyes focused on Serafina. Daddy? Is she the one Mommy meant? She looks like a princess who beat the dragon all by herself. Can we keep her? Serafina covered her mouth. For the first time in years, she cried. Not from pain, from being seen. 1 week later, Malcolm awaited trial. The project was canceled. The EPA declared Lincoln Heights a contamination site requiring proper remediation. Serafina resigned as CEO. She established the Theodore Kensington Environmental Justice Foundation. She came for dinner, read Rosalie bedtime stories, sat at the kitchen table with Garrett afterward. I have something for you. She placed a small box before him. Inside, a new watch band, Italian leather, warm brown. I don't want you to replace the watch, she said. But a new band doesn't mean forgetting. It means moving forward while carrying her with you. Garrett took her hands. I don't love you because you're like Alara. You're not like her, and that's not a bad thing. She looked at him. I love you because you're you. Because you had the courage to look in the mirror, not like what you saw, and change. Because you destroyed your own empire to protect children you'd never met. Are you sure? I said terrible things. You changed. That's what matters. 1 year later, spring, Lincoln Community School. The new building gleamed in April sunshine, built on properly cleaned land. Today was the dedication ceremony. Garrett stood on the platform as the foundation's community coordinator. Beside him, Sarah gave her speech. This school is named for a woman I never met, but who changed my father's life, and through him, changed mine. The banner unfurled, Alara Holden Community. Elementary school after the ceremony. The park beside the school. Garrett pushed Rosalie on the swing. Sarah stood beside him, hand in his. Daddy? Rosalie's voice was serious. Do you think Mommy is happy? Why do you ask? Because Mommy always said she wanted you to be happy, and now you smile more. Sarah smiles more. I smile more too. She looked at her small hands. I think we took the broken pieces and made something new. It doesn't look exactly like before, but it's still beautiful. Maybe even more beautiful, because broken pieces have cracks, and light shines through the cracks, and that makes everything sparkle. Garrett hugged her, tears flowing. Sarah knelt beside them. Rosie, you are the wisest child I have ever known. You know what? I like when you're here. Our home feels warmer. That evening, Sarah showed Garrett a photo. A craftsman house, big yard, wraparound porch, 10 minutes from the school, 4 bedrooms, one for Rosie, one for us, one for guests, and one for, she blushed, the future. He pulled her close. Some things are worth fighting for, she whispered, even when it costs everything. And sometimes, he replied, losing everything is just making room for something better. On his wrist, Ilara's watch ticked steadily. Old face, still 3 minutes slow. New band, warm Italian leather. Like their lives, keeping what mattered, changing what needed to change. The watch ticked on, still there, still keeping time.
The story above leaves a profound lesson about the value of listening, moral responsibility, and the capacity for human change. On the surface, it's the story of a poor father confronting power and money to protect his daughter. But at a deeper level, it reminds us that wealth or status doesn't determine a person's worth. It's their choices in the most difficult moments that make that possible. The man, an ordinary electrician, has no power, no money, and even lives in constant hardship. The only things he has are his love for his daughter and the memory of his deceased wife. The old clock, a few minutes slow each day, becomes a symbol of this. An imperfect past, but one that is true and worthy of respect. He doesn't fight with violence or hatred, but with steadfastness, courage, and honesty. When faced with injustice, he doesn't remain silent. When his daughter is in danger, he doesn't hesitate. The story shows that kindness and paternal love can become a force greater than any other. Conversely, the female protagonist initially portrays a person hardened by power and success. She uses coldness to mask her inner emptiness. The cruel words she utters don't stem from pure malice, but from a soul accustomed to treating people as mere numbers and profits. But the most important point of the story is that she changed. When confronted with the truth, with the memory of her father and the woman who taught him what conscience was, she chose to sacrifice everything to do what was right. The story affirms that people are not defined by past mistakes, but by their decision to correct them in the present. Ultimately, the biggest message is, true progress cannot be built on the sacrifice of the vulnerable, especially children. Development without ethics is merely destruction disguised in a glamorous way. Only when people learn to listen and prioritize life and human dignity over profit will society truly become a better place.